And so let me go ahead and go to AutoCAD. And if you want to go ahead and fire up AutoCAD, if you don't already have it open up, it would be good to kind of follow along with me. So we're just going to begin a brand new drawing. And the commands we're going to be looking at all would reside primarily under one of two areas. If you're at the Home tab, okay, you'll see this panel marked annotation, and it has two broad areas there, text and then dimensioning. And actually there's more than dimensioning. That's a quick dimension, and this is a dimension creation. This is your multi-leader, and these are what are called tables. We're not going to deal with any of that, but under text, which we're going to take a look at first, you'll notice there are two types of text creations there. One is called the multi-line text, or referred to very simply as M-text. And then the other one is called single-line text, which just goes by the name of text. The old name for it was D-text, which stood for dynamic text. So at one time there were three types of text objects in AutoCAD. Now there's basically only two, the multi-line text and the text object. Another location you can find these types of objects would be under the Annotate tab. So if you went to the Annotate tab, here's your text panel. There's your text creation, multi-line, single line, and then there's your dimension. And then it's also broken out. Here's your multi-leaders. So you have a little bit more control, particularly when you get into the aspects of dimensioning, as we'll see when you go to this tab, Annotate, and over here. But if you're just doing simple stuff, you can do it through the Home tab. So let's go ahead and back to the Home tab. So let's look at text real quick. I want to go back to that diagram I was showing you before we placed some. And the big thing to understand is that text is a bit of a complex object, and it works a lot like you would use in Word or, let's say, Excel. But it has some other things about it that are a little different. So let me go back over to here, and let's look at this. So when we're talking about text, whether it's M-text or D-text, single line text, you use what are called alignment positions to place it. And those would be also used in M-text, but they're a little different in the way they work. So I'm going to kind of focus on single line text because it works better. But if you're used to Word, Excel, or placing those kind of text, you really have three major alignment positions. You have what's called left justified, which would be right under the S right there, and then the middle justified, and then you have what's called right justified. So that's kind of how that works. Now in AutoCAD, they decided you needed a whole lot more justification points. So what you have here are other ways that you can justify it. And so you have what's called a baseline, which is what the text resides on. Let me do something here because I think it'll be easier if I draw this. Let me fire this up a minute. Okay, so basically you have three major lines with text that it kind of resides on. Let me see if I can draw these real quick. So I would have the baseline, and then I have a top line. So if my text is sitting, let's say, I'm just going to draw it right in here. We have A, B, C. The characters that the line that they work on, this is called your baseline. And the uppercase characters will hit this top line. And in the AutoCAD world, the distance from the baseline to the top line defines what's called text height. Now, in the heights that we use in AutoCAD, it's going to be based on whatever your current units are. So if you're in inches, you know, that could be 2/10 of an inch or 1/2 an inch or whatever. If it's architectural, it would be feet primarily. Now, if you're used to Word or Excel, they use what are called points. Okay, so we don't spec them out in points, but just to give you an idea, 1 point is approximately 1/72 of an inch. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, if you have lowercase characters, there will be another line down here. So, for instance, if I had a lowercase j, that would tend to go below the baseline. So this is what's called a bottom line. And this type of character is referred to as a descender. So not all fonts support descenders. I would say probably 90% of them do, but some don't. And in that case, the bottom line will collapse up into the baseline. So these are your major lines, your top, your base, and your bottom. And then you have lines that run this way, essentially one here and one here. So this is determined, the width between those two guys is determined by the number of characters you have. So this could be 1,000 characters between, or it could be 1 character between. So this is your left side, and this is your right side. And then you have one right in the middle as well between it, so it would be halfway between. If you look over here, it's called your center line. So what you have is where a vertical line crosses a horizontal line, you get what's called a justification. So if I put my center line in here, you have, these are your major ones. That's your left justified, middle center justified, and right justified. But this one right here is what they call top right. This one is called top center. This one is called top, I'm sorry, that should be top left. This is top right, excuse me. And then we have bottom left, bottom center, geez, can't spell today. Bottom left, bottom center, and bottom right. And then somewhere between here you have a middle line. So it's usually, and I say usually because it's not always, but usually it's smack dab right halfway. So you can also then generate what's called middle left text, what they call middle center text, and middle right. Okay, so they kind of went overboard. All these justifications that you have are based on that. So remember, like in Word, it's just the 3, left, center, right. Well, here you have a bunch more. Now, they are very useful because those are going to be ways that you can align text up with. So that's why they're kind of important. So when we place text, one of the first questions AutoCAD's going to ask you is what justification you're using. Also, text is driven by a style. So a style will determine how it looks. And essentially, it's composed of different properties, which we'll take a look at. So the way we would find these, if I'm at the Home tab and I go to this annotation pull down like here, these are called styles. Okay, that's your dim style or your text style. This is your dimension style. This is your multi-leader style. This is your table style. If we go to this right here, the text style, click on that, you'll open up this dialog box. And you can also just type in the word style. That's an easy way to get to it. But what we're looking at are text styles that exist in your drawing right now. Currently, there's 2 of them. One's called annotative, and the other one is called standard. And then these are properties over here. These are properties of your style. So you basically have, for any style, you have a font file, a font style, a height, a width factor, and an obliquing angle. Those are your basic ones. And then some of these fonts will support other things like upside down or backwards or whatever. Now there's 2 types of font files. Notice this is called Arial, and it has a TT in front of it. TT stands for True Type. So that's an Adobe True Type font. And those are the fonts that you're most used to in Windows and Word and those kind of things, because that's what Windows uses. Prior to True Types being available in AutoCAD, they had their own fonts, the proprietary font. It was called a shapefile. And if you open up this list and you scroll down, you'll see some, like if we go down to what's called Simplex, if you scroll down, you'll see one called Simplex down here. Further on, there's a Simplex, and it has a .shx, and notice you get a different look to it. That's a proprietary AutoCAD font. So those are a lot different because they were in AutoCAD from the very beginning, and they weren't, nothing else will read them. So they're only available in AutoCAD, but you can display either shapefiles, .shp or SHXs, or you can do true types, which are .ttf files. At one time, there were something called PostScript fonts, PBFs. Those no longer exist. You can actually still get drawings from people that have PBF files in them, and then what AutoCAD will do is it'll substitute something for it because it can't generate them anymore. So if you create a font, or if you create a style, you have to basically have the font name, font style, height, width factor, and obliquing angle. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. So you can go ahead and cancel out of this box, but I just want you to understand that's what's driving how this thing looks. So we're going to go do a very simple piece of font, text right now, and just to show you how this works. So I'm not going to do too much with multi-line text. Multi-line text is more like a word processor. So, well, we'll see. Well, let's get to this first. Let's go to the text here, and what I want you to do is make sure you grab what's called the single line text, or you can just type in the word text. So the first thing it's going to ask you is to place a start point. And there's an automatic start point, which is your justification point. Notice, maybe you can see that on mine right now, it says I'm using a left justified. So if I want to change that, I can either go to the justify option and change it, or I can type in the two characters that would change it. So for instance, top left would be TL. I could just type that in. We're just going to go ahead and select left justified. So I'm just going to pick a point. So what that does, it's kind of like sticking a pin in there. And the next thing it wants to do is know, okay, what's the height of this text? And notice this would be in units. Okay, remember they don't use points, so there's not 12 point or whatever that you're used to. So right now it's set to 0.2 inches. Okay, so 2/10 of an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and beef that up a little bit. I'm going to make this 0.25 just to change that. Okay, and then the rotation angle is the direction of the baseline, essentially. So if you want your text to go in this direction, that would be a 0 rotation. That would be like a 30-degree rotation, 90-degree. So what I'm doing is defining the direction of the baseline. So let's go ahead, we'll just accept 0. And you'll notice that you get this little symbol. It's called an I-beam, and that tells you now you can type. So the one thing we'll notice also is as we type, the space bar will actually function as a space bar now, which didn't before. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to type my name, and you guys can type your name in. And when you get your name in, go ahead and hit enter, and it'll drop you down like a carriage return. So I'm going to go ahead and put AutoCAD 2020, hit enter. And then I'm going to hit EVT 155, and I'm going to hit enter again. So each time you hit the enter key, it's like a carriage return is, and it's just bringing you down. So eventually when you're done, you just hit enter twice, and it'll create the text for you, and that's all there really is to it. So since this is single line text, each line is its own object. So not each character, each line. So if I click on the top, you'll notice that's highlighting and nothing else is. When I click on this, that's my second object, and that's my third object. So the difference between this type of text and what they call multi-line text is that if I created this with multi-line text, that would all be one object. So multi-line text is more akin to a word processor. In fact, it functions a lot like Word does, and you can do a lot of formats with multi-line text that you can't do with single-line text. However, if you're placing objects, placing objects is probably placed easier with this type of text. Okay, any questions on that so far?
Quick question. So I clicked on the justify options,
Yep.
and I saw there were 9 options,
Right.
and one of them, the ones that said B, I'm assuming that was base and not bottom, right?
No, it's bottom. Base is just left, center, or right.
Okay, so okay, so if you set it, then none of the characters that go below the baseline will be below that line.
Right. Now,
Okay.
if your font doesn't support descenders, it just doesn't have them ever, okay? There is no bottom line. Effectively, it just collapses up into the baseline, okay?
What, and I'm sorry if I missed that, but which categories of fonts does that include?
I'm not sure, because I really, like I told you, most of the fonts that I've ever used, certain lowercase characters are going to have descenders. I've just known from what I've read that there are a few that do not support descenders. So I don't really have the answer for you. Because any font that I've ever used, it always has descenders. So in other words, I'm always getting a baseline and a bottom line as well. Okay.
Okay.
Is that answering your question?
Yes, but so there is the option to do the bottom and not the base.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, let's go ahead and we'll do that real quick. Just go ahead, if you select this stuff, just escape out of there, okay? So if you want to apply a different one, let's go over here and again, select single line text. So under justify, you can just go to what's called bottom left, which would be BL, and select a point. And then we'll use the same height, we'll use the same rotation angle, and you can just type in the same thing if you want. Or not, you could just put any characters because we don't really need to see a bunch. So notice when I pick on this, do you notice there's a blue box now, a blue grip below the left justified?
Yeah.
So these guys, that's your baseline left point, okay? Right there, baseline left, baseline left.
You mean bottom?
Bottom left, yeah, excuse me. You got me saying it now. Yeah. So this is essentially baseline left, but they just call it left, okay?
And that's what you're, okay.
Okay, so what's interesting is when you click on a piece of text, you get these grips. These are called grips. You always get left justified, whether it's actually a left justified piece of text or not. But yeah, if there's another justification like this one does have it, then you get it that one too. Now, here's where this comes into play, is if you use O-snaps, you can snap a line to the justification of this text. And the O-snap that you use for text is called the insert O-snap, which is, where is it? Insertion, right there. So that will snap to that text justification point. So that allows you to line things up very effectively. Okay, is that making sense?
So you're saying if you snap to a line with insertion, it will automatically set the bottom.
Right. So let's do this. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to line. I'm going to shift right click, go to insert. Where is it? Why am I not seeing it? Oh, there it is, insert. And if I touch the text, notice it snaps to the bottom point line. And if I do another insert, it goes to that text. So that, notice that's going from the bottom left of that one to the bottom left of that one. So that gives me a way of lining stuff up.
Wait, do you have to turn that on? Because it doesn't show up for me.
Well, what you have to do is you have to either turn it on and let it run, or you can do a shift right click and grab it through an override. You see what I'm saying?
Well, when I do shift right click, it does.
You,
I don't get it, but
you
I'm
don't do a
probably doing
shortcut?
something wrong.
When you do a shift right click, you're not getting that menu?
I do, but I don't get.
Inserts at the bottom.
Oh, insert. Okay, sorry, because it said insertion.
I know. It says insertion here.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah, but it's actually called insert. So do you notice how I drew this line underneath that right there? That is the bottom line of that text right there. Because I drew it from its insertion point. Okay. Where this guy's bottom line would be down here, although I'm not justifying it by bottom. Okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what you should notice also is these guys are using a particular font right now. Anybody recognize that font? It's a pretty common one. I use a lot. It's called Arial.
Yeah.
So this is an Arial.ttf. Mary Gray. Not sure who that is. Okay. All right. So what we have going on here then is those are being driven by that style. Okay. So let's go. We're going to create a couple of new styles just to show you this difference and then how this works. So we're going to go to the style command here. And I'm going to select this. So this box should pop up. Is that working for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. So what we want to do is create a new style. So we're going to go over to the new button here. Generates that style name. So you can call it anything you want. What I usually do is I try to name them based on the font file that I'm going to use. So we're going to create one called Times New Roman. So I'm going to call this TNR for Times New Roman. So the name here is really meaningless, okay, but it's an identifier. So I'm going to call it Times New Roman, okay, and then I'm going to come to this guy right here, and I'm going to find Times New Roman. Now you can actually type the name in here, but it doesn't always. You have to do it really fast. So I can type in like Times and find it pretty easily, or you can scroll down. But make sure we're getting the Times New Roman to show up. Okay, is everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay, so then under the font style, you have regular, you have bold italic, and you have italic. So what you can do is do those settings, but you can't have one character within a string bolded and not the rest of them. So this is going to be across the board. That's the downside. M-text will allow you to do like a word processor would. So let's go ahead. We'll make this italic. So the height thing is important. This is what's called the fixed height indicator, and it's best to leave it at 0. Okay, because if you set it to a fixed height, it never asks you what height you want to use when you create these styles or these text objects, and so it's really hard to edit them later. Also, when you get into objects like dimensions, multi-liters, few other things, if you have a fixed height here, it'll override what the dimension's doing, and it becomes a real problem. Okay, so you definitely always want to leave this at 0. Okay, so the width factor is a height to width ratio. What you can think of is that this character is got a box that's around it, and the height and the width are like 1 to 1. So what that means, 1 to 1. Notice if I change that to 2, it elongates it in the width direction and is less in the height. If I go the other way, it elongates it in the height direction and makes it less in the width. For for whatever purpose you're doing there, I mean, make sure you know why you're doing it. I would say most of the time you're going to have your width factor 1:1, okay, height to width ratio. The other thing that's major is the obliquing angle. So this is like taking a piece of text and slanting it. So your reference for the obliquing angle is right up along the spine of the text, okay? And normally that's going to be 0. If we give it positive oblique, let's say 50 degrees, notice it obliques it. You can see this image tile, it's pretty cool because it's showing you exactly what it's doing. I can go 50 degrees or 75 degrees. Theoretically, I could go to 90, except it won't let me, but if I had 90, it would slam it, you know, all the way down. If you go to a negative oblique, it'll take it back the other way. So I can do like a negative 50. Again, if you, unless you're looking for a particular style, I usually use my obliquing at 0. And even I want you to notice, this is an italicized piece of text, so even though obliquing is 0, it looks like it has that slant. That's the aspect of the italicizing. So once you've given it a name, you've given it a font, and you've set the other settings, what you need to do here, this is really important. A lot of people think they've created the style at this point. You haven't created it until you hit the apply button. Once that grays out, you know you're good. Okay. So let's, we're going to create one more here, and we're going to generate what's called a simplex. So I'm just going to call it simplex. And I'm going to grab a simplex font, and this is a shapefile. So this will be a little bit different. You notice for one, it has an SHX after it. And the other thing, simplexes will not support these font styles, so that's why that's grayed out. Okay, so this shapefile is rather not simplex. And so this is a proprietary AutoCAD font. Height 0, width factor, obliquing, we're going to leave that all alone, and we're just going to hit apply, and we're going to hit close. So what we have now done, like layers, when you generate layers in a drawing, those become part of your drawing file. When you generate text styles, they become part of your drawing file as well. So if you go to your annotation drop down here and you open this up, you'll notice now you should see a new style simplex and a new style Times New Roman. And the last font that you created is the one, or the last style I should say, is the one that's current. So if we go out, notice I've got simplex current. If I go out and generate another piece of single line text, come over here and pick that, and I'm just going to, again, type in some characters. I'm not going to worry about it. Just accept the, going to accept the height, accept the rotation angle. Notice this one is in a different format and looks on the font. Okay, you guys all getting that to work?
I hate to stop you, but I'm still not, when I select new text box and I have a line and I do the OSNAP override, when I click insert, I don't get any. Do I have to keep holding down shift? I don't know why I'm not getting.
Okay. All right, you ready? I'll do it with you. Go to line. Is it asking you to specify point, right?
I already have a line. Oh, does it only work once the text is already there?
Oh yeah, because it's snapping to a text object.
Okay. I'm sorry. I
That's
thought
all right.
you were saying we could snap a new text object to an existing line.
Oh well, you can do that too, but you have to use another snap. So for instance,
What's that? That's the one I want.
let's say here. Let's say draw a circle here. Just draw a circle anywhere. All right. So let's say we want to place that text right in the center of that sucker. Okay. So we're going to go to text here, single line text. Now this time I want to use a justify of middle or middle center. So I'm going to choose MC for middle center. Now I want the middle center text to be right in the center of this circle. So I'm going to hit shift, right click, center, snap to the center of that circle. And I'm going to give it a height of 0.25, 0 rotation. And now type in whatever I want it to say. And that text is exactly in the center of circle, notice. See that? So you can do it both ways. So if you have text in your drawing already, you can snap objects to the text to align, or you can do vice versa. Did you guys get that to work?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So it's kind of two ways of going about it. Does that make sense now?
Yes.
How about our styles? Everybody get their styles working?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So watch, if you want to change some stuff up about a piece of text, it's pretty easy. So if I want to click, I want to make this style, let's say I use the wrong style in this stuff. All you have to do is click on that, right click, you go to properties, and you'll notice that the properties dialog box under the text, the style is set to simplex in my case. If I find Times New Roman, I can do that, close that box, hit the escape key, and what I did was basically change the property that's driving that text. So instead of it being with the simplex font, it's now with that the Times New Roman. So that's a very cool editing tool with text. You guys all getting that to work?
Can you say you want to place a gap between an existing line and a new text box? Can you like snap it, set a distance to the bottom line?
That would be a little harder because it depends on, so notice this text right here. This is bottom line text, so I might be able to do it based on that. Okay.
So the way you would do that if you wanted that, you would offset the line, whatever distance, snap to that, and then delete it.
There you go. Right. And what you're then doing is using a reference line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll use, when you're going to see on this next assignment we're going to be doing, I'm going to have you guys draw reference lines, and then you're going to blow them out so you don't even see them. Yeah. So that's a good way of doing it. All right. Perfect. Those are great questions. Let me show you something else that's pretty cool. So let's say we know that this is all left justified. Okay. So go ahead and select your left justified string of text there, and right click, go to properties. We can change the justification point from left to say middle. And so notice how it lines up now. So now it's all middle justified as opposed to left justified. So again, you can do these kind of things in Word pretty easily, but you only have 3 justifications. In AutoCAD, you got like 9 or 10. So they kind of went overboard with them. But you know, they're all good because in the kind of stuff that we do, it's nice to be able to have that flexibility to move things around. So there's a lot of other properties. I mean, I can click on this guy, go to properties, and I can change the justification, which I just did. I can change the height. I can change the obliquing, the rotation angle, the obliquing, all of that. So you can adjust a lot of those things in there pretty readily. So you don't have to live with what you created. Okay, there's all kinds of good editing tools within that. Is that working for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to change the text contents, you can use a command called text edit or dd edit, or the easiest way is you just take the text and you double click it. And when you double click it, it'll open up that kind of box right there. So if I want to change that to that, I can do that. The only thing that dd edit will do though is allows you to change the text contents. It will not allow you to change properties. So to do properties, you're going to have to take it to a properties command. So you'd have to left click, or select your text, and right click to properties. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention was that text will take on layer properties as well. So if you have a layer, create a layer, give it a color, let's say magenta, and I move that text to that layer, it will take on the color property for me as well. Text will ignore line types and it will ignore line weights. Okay, let me say that again. This text will ignore line types and it'll ignore line weights. This type of text, though, will take them on, I believe. So you got to be careful with shape files. Shape files could take on a line type and they could take on a line weight. So you have to be careful with those guys. But the true types will not. Okay, is everybody getting that to work? Are we good, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Couple of little utilities that you can use with text, which are kind of neat. One is to do what's called QText, which stands for quick text. And what this will do is generate rectangles in place of where your text is. So the reason kind of being text can be somewhat intensive. If you had a lot of notes on a CAD file, it can slow it down. Not as bad as it used to be. But if you don't really need to see your text other than just kind of know where it is, what you can do is you can QText it. So all we're going to do is type in the word QText, QTEXT, and hit enter. And this is what's called a system variable. So it's speaking to you in a binary format. So your QText system variable right now is set to 0. We're gonna turn QText on by selecting 1. And we're gonna type in regen, R-E. And when you do that, that's what your text looks like. So your text is still there. It's just looking that way. Does everybody get that to work?
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen when you print this? Is it going to print your text or is it going to print rectangles?
Print your text.
Well, let's see. We're going to go to printer real quick. I'm not going to worry about the printer. I'm just going to say do it with the extents. Center it. Oh, it's going to make me do something. Just select, if you want to select the PDF down here, just select the PDF. Preview it. Well, there's your answer. What you see is what you get. So they call that WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So with AutoCAD, your printing is WYSIWYG. So that obviously doesn't be good for us. So we'll cancel out of there. So if you really need to see your text, what you're going to do is you're going to QText it back and turn it off and then regen it. And there's your QText. Okay. Any questions on that? You probably won't use that too much.
So that's kind of just, you can use it like a comment feature, turn it on and off.
You can, yeah, and it kind of, the thing about it is it's really not necessary like it used to be. But if you do have a whole lot of CAD, let's say you have a drawing that's just loaded with notes, okay, and you're putting some details in there. Sometimes it's better to just QText that stuff and get it out of your way. And that way you can draw around it. You know you're not going through your text. You know, that's the only advantage to it. But it's really not used that much anymore. But this one's kind of cool. This one's called text fill. So if you type in text, T-E-X-T, fill, F-I-L-L, and hit enter, this one is a system variable. Right now your text fill is turned on. If I set it 0 and hit enter, it'll turn it off. And a regen, R-E, doesn't change it. But what's happened is all these pieces of text right here are not filled in any longer. It doesn't look like it, but you will see it at the printer. That's the weird thing about this. So if I do go to the printer, and let's say we grab, again, we'll do a PDF file, tell it to display extents, center it, and preview it. Notice your text is hollow shells now, as opposed to what it was before.
If you regen that, would it show?
Nope, it doesn't. It never does. And the other thing that's kind of interesting, if you notice, the shape files, they ignore they ignore text fills. So because they don't have any substance to them other than just vectors. But these guys will take that text fill on. Okay. One thing about that little system variable, once you turn him off, he stays off forever. And it doesn't run with the drawing, it runs with your system. Okay. So what you guys want to do right now is cancel out of here. And you want to go back into text fill. You want to turn text fill back on. Okay. Because if you don't do that, every drawing you do from now on will always have your text open like that. All right, any questions on that? So text, pretty simple, okay? We're gonna pretty much just be utilizing the single line text. I'll show you, let me show you multi-line text real quick. It's a little bit more complex. So go up here to multi-line text. And what you do is you kind of open up a space. Just don't worry about the size of the rectangle, but what you're doing is getting kind of like a rectangle there. And you'll also notice now you have this context sensitive editing tab up here for text editor. So this is kind of like a word processor, and that really is what its function is. So we can choose styles, but we can also just use fonts. So we don't have to accept fonts or styles. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to type in the same thing I had before. Okay, so it looks pretty similar to what we had before, right? And when you get done, I spelled AutoCAD wrong. I do that all the time. All right, so when I get done with this, you come up here and you hit this close text editor. So as we look at this text right here, it doesn't look a whole lot different than that text. The difference is though that if I click on that text, you'll notice it's all one object as opposed to this being each individual objects. Okay. You guys are getting that to work?
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's something cool that you can do with this text that you can't do with this text. So if you click on that text, actually double click it, you can come in here and for instance, you can highlight the word AutoCAD 2020 and then you can come up here and you can say, well, I might want that bolded. Well, this won't work because it's the wrong style. So I'm going to change the styles on that. So I changed the style. Now I can come up here and I can bold that. I can italicize it, but the rest of it's not. So just like in a Word document, you can go out and have different fonts within it. You can make some italic, some not. All of that good stuff you can use. They have bullets, all kinds of good stuff.
When I did that, it said, wait, where did you go to change the style? Because I clicked on it in the ribbon and it changed the whole text box.
Yeah, I did too. I came up here and changed it. The reason it wouldn't edit for me before because it was simplex font. So I just changed everything to this Arial.
Okay, and then you change it.
And then I went and highlighted
okay.
what I wanted to change. So for instance, I went up here and I said, I want to make that bold italic. And I could even say, oh, I want to make that red. And once you do that, there's your text. So it's pretty cool. It's a lot more complex for just placing single items of text, though. This is a lot quicker and cleaner. This has got a lot more to it. Okay. So is anybody wondering, can you convert this type of text into that kind of text, or this kind of text into that kind of text? Anybody think about that?
Explode?
The answer is yes. You can't explode single line text. Okay, so if I try to explode single line text, it won't do anything. But if you explode multi-line text, it becomes single line text. So this is now single line text. Okay, now you can go the other way. and you have to go over to this guy called Express Tools. And under Express Tools, there's all kinds of really cool text commands here. But this one's called Convert to MText, which is, this doesn't work perfectly, by the way, but you select all of the lines that you want, hit enter, and it's now single line text again, or multi-line, excuse me. So you can work it both ways, okay? Absolutely.
What were those, what did you say those text commands were under?
You have to go to
Express Tools.
Yeah,
Okay.
Express Tools tab. Okay. And there's some actually pretty cool ones. Notice there's, you can align it along an arc, so it'll actually dimension along an arc. There's those converts. You can actually explode text in here. So there's some pretty kind of neat stuff in there, but you're not going to use most of these things. Most of these things you're going to be utilizing, you know, just the simple kinds of operations that we have.
You mean we can explode text?
Yeah.
The way you just said that we couldn't do it with explode.
Right.
Okay.
So let me show you what happens though, because when you explode it, it's no longer text. So I'm going to see if I can find it. Let's see. There it is. Explode text. I'm going to explode this text. Okay. You know, this is no longer text. This is polylines right now. You see that? So that's not actually a text object any longer. So,
Can you undo that with a command, or do you just have to do undo?
You can only undo it if I do it like right now, okay? If I wait too long to undo it, then it's going to be a problem. And I could never do it down the road. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
Without undoing all the other stuff that you did to get to that point. So in other words, there's no undo exploded text. There's not a command that does that. All right. And you wouldn't do that very often. I mean, if I wanted to like trim this text, I could do that, but you know, that's just not something I would use that often. So, okay. So any questions on that? One other thing I mentioned about the text, which is kind of cool, especially MText, if you have a Word document out there somewhere and you want to bring it in AutoCAD, you can select your Word document and then you can paste it to the clipboard, and then you can bring it into AutoCAD's MText editor, and it'll convert it into an MText object for you. So that's a nice thing, because then you can have that inside your document. Sometimes it's quicker to go out to Word and type your stuff up and then just paste it and bring it in, as opposed to trying to type it in AutoCAD. So I think it's slower for me. I'm much quicker on a word processor.
Can you do that in any, using any application?
I think so. Anything like, for instance, Excel you're talking about, or anything else?
And you use the clipboard to do that?
Yeah. So I don't know if I have let me see if I have a Word document somewhere. I'll show you what I'm looking at here. I don't know if I have any handy. Let's see. Oh, here's an outline. This is a Word document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to select it, just what I want to bring into AutoCAD. And I'm going to right click and copy this to the clipboard. Okay. So I'm going to go out back to AutoCAD. I'm going to open up an MText. And I'm going to right click in here and I'm going to paste it. And there's my document. And that has become, that document, where'd it go? There it is. That document is actually an MText object now in AutoCAD. It's no longer linked to Word. So that's a really quick, easy way of getting stuff in there. But notice it's not perfect. Like, notice that didn't line up right. Sometimes it loses stuff. It's still got my bullets in there, but it doesn't always work perfectly.
Is that in the destination font?
It is in what, I think it's whatever, no, this is in whatever it came from. So notice I used Arial here and Times New Roman there. If you go back to that document, notice it looks exactly like that.
So so is that only because you used two fonts that you already had, or it will recognize any font that exists, or what?
Well, it'll recognize any font that, yeah, any font that exists, because these are all true type fonts. They're all common true type fonts. If you had some funky font that you were using that you got from somewhere, AutoCAD may not have it in its repertoire, so it may substitute something. But in general, it's keeping these all together. So that's an Arial font, and this is a Times New Roman. Yeah. Also notice the size of this. That's what these grips are for. If you make those smaller, what it'll do is it's just resizes your document. So that'll come into play with like how many lines and all of that you got. So it's actually very cool way of doing things. But again, unless you're doing extensive amounts of text, D-text is single line text is probably the better way to go. Okay. Anybody else questions? All right. One more thing, and then we're gonna move on to dimensions. Okay. So one thing that you should probably always be focused on is spelling, spell check. So AutoCAD has a spell checker in it. It uses basically the Windows spell checker. So you just type in the word spell. And if I spell it right, and then hit enter, and it asks you what you want to spell check. Usually I just do the entire drawing and then just hit start. So just like Word will do is it'll go out and it'll say, okay, I found this. What do you want to do with it? It's not in the dictionary. Do you want to add it? Do you want to ignore it? So I might say, oh, that's a good one. I'm going to ignore it. Go to that one. That one's also an ignore. Well, that one, maybe I wanted to change it to something else, so you can change it. So just whatever you want to do. But I would probably get in the habit of making sure that you spell check your document before you print it. Because what usually happens with me is I'll print it and I find all kinds of mistakes, simple mistakes. So once you do that, you close it, and that's a good deal. So kind of, I guess I would say, get in the habit of before you print a document that has a lot of text in it, I would probably try to do a spell check before I print it, and then I would save it, and then I would print it. Okay. Any other questions anybody has? Okay. So we're gonna then shift gears here a little bit. We're gonna talk about dimensions, and dimensions are pretty cool. They in AutoCAD they're kind of what I call point and shoot. They pretty much you just pick 2 points and they're gonna establish a dimension for you. So I'm gonna show you real quickly a dimension, and you can just don't do this yet because I want to explain a few things first. But I'm just gonna grab this real simple dimension here. So this is what we call a dimension in AutoCAD. And some people refer to just the text piece of it as the dimension. So in other words, they would say, well, that dimension is 10.0796. But in the AutoCAD world, this whole thing grouped together is what we call a dimension. Okay. So it has various parts associated with it. Now, this type of dimension is what we call a linear dimension. And we have other types of dimensions. We have linears, we have angulars, we have radial, we have diameter dimensions. I'm going to show you a few of these, not necessarily all of them, because we're not going to need to know all of these, okay? But once you understand the basic dimensions, you'll be able to do pretty much anything you want with them. So they are very easy to create, but to make them look the way you want them to look, that's more of an editing kind of process. So we're going to take a look at some of those editing tools. And ultimately, like a style for a text piece, there's a style that drives how this dimension looks, and that's called a dim style, which is short for dimension style. So let me go through the parts of this first, and I'm going to explode this dimension just to show you I can do that. All right, so the first thing is, oops, let me undo that. I don't want to explode it. First thing, there's two lines here. There's one over here, and there's one over here. Those are called extension lines, okay? And some people call them witness lines. And they're the lines that actually kind of, you're measuring between the two extension lines. There are typically two. If I pick this point first and that point second, this would be extension line 1. This would be extension line 2. If you reverse it, then that's 1 and 2. And you can suppress one, have one up, not suppress, or you can suppress them both. And I'm going to show you there's going to be reasons why I don't want all of them on or both of them on. All right, so we have this guy right here that runs between these guys. That's called a dimension line, okay? And if the text is in the middle of the dimension line, then you have two dimension lines, one here and one here. So I could turn that one off, turn that one on. You can float the text above it, and then you just have one dimension line. Attached to the endpoint of that is this guy. This is called a dimension arrow, or an arrowhead. And these guys come in different forms. So you have probably about 25 or so different arrowheads you can use in AutoCAD. And plus, if you're really into it, you can create your own. So you're not limited to what they supply you with. But I mean, most people would use that because it's just simple. And again, you usually have, if you have two dimension lines, you're going to have two arrowheads, or an endpoint and an endpoint, you're going to have two arrowheads. These arrowheads look the same, but you can have an arrowhead on this side different than the arrowhead on that side. This guy right here, this is called your dimension text, and it's actually an mText object. So it's actually the kind of object we just looked at up here. So it will have some functionality that you would have like with any dimension or with any mText object. Okay, so the last thing is this little dot up here. I think you can see there's one here and there's one right there. Those are called def points, and that's short for definition point. And those are the things that are actually doing the measuring. Notice they show up here, but they actually won't show up when you print because they are put on their own special layer. If you go up to the layers now, you'll notice I have a layer up there called def points. And if you ever get a drawing that has def points, that means you were generating dimensions at some point. And I noticed some of your drawings that you guys give me, some of you have played with dimensions, so you'll have a def points layer. And it's really, really hard to get rid of. But it does have a special quality about it. You can change the color of the def points layer, but you cannot, it will not print. So it's an automatic no print layer. So any object that you put on this layer will not print. And that's why this guy doesn't print. Def points don't print. So again, you have the extension lines, dimension line, arrowhead, dimension text, and def points. So depending on the type of objects that we create, the kind of dimension objects that we create, they're not always going to all look the same. Okay, so you're not going to always have the same parts. Dimensions, usually you create them first, and then you may do a little bit of editing. And I will tell you this, it's not usually always going to be perfect. So you normally have to do some kind of editing at some point with dimensions. So just kind of so you know. So what I'm going to have you do, we're going to go back over to the Blackboard site. And I want you to, I have a dimension PDF file here. So if you have a printer, you might want to go ahead and print that out or just have that available. We're going to utilize this little diagram and we're going to place some dimensions. So what we see here, these are all linear dimensions. So this is a horizontal linear dimension. This is a vertical linear dimension. This is called an aligned linear dimension. And this is what we call a continuous string of dimensions. So this is very commonly used. Architects will use this quite a bit. And this is called a baseline dimension process. Okay, so we're going to kind of look at these. All right. I have this little drawing for you. So what you can also do, if you want to, grab this guy right here, just download him, and then open him up. Okay, so it should look like this. So take a minute to do that. So with dimensions, just like any other object, because they tend to be a little complex, we like to create layers for them and keep those uniquely on those layers. So my part that I drew here is on the 0 layer. And if you open up the
I'm
layer
sorry,
dialog
did you
box-
say open up the DWG file?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't open up the PDFs or anything. But you might want to have that PDF active so that if you want to click on it, you can look at it or print it out if you have that capability. Is everybody getting that to open for them? Anybody having troubles with it? Is anybody out there?
I've got an antique computer here, so
That's okay. You should just be able to like download, double click it. If you have AutoCAD open, it'll launch it, and right away into AutoCAD it should. Or you can drag it to another location and open it from there. Sometimes that works too.
My CAD teacher told me to always open files from the CAD program.
That's true. But for this one, not for this one, we're okay to just do what I said to make it simple. Is everybody okay now?
Yeah, I got mine to open.
Okay. All right, Alec, you good? Is he there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm good.
That's okay. All right. Okay. All right. All right, Nathan, how you doing?
Just waiting on my old girl here.
Okay. Just let me know when you're ready, because I don't want to move ahead before everybody's there. Okay, while we're waiting, if you go to the Home tab, under the Annotation section, there's this command called Dimension, which will do multiple different types of dimensions. It kind of, you select your part and it kind of just dimensions it for you, and it might sound like it's really cool, but you don't have a lot of control sometimes. So over here you have more control. These are your dimension creation tools, and if you drop that little drop down there, you have what are called linears, aligned, angular, arc length, radius, diameter, ordinate, and jog. And we're only going to look at a few linears and some of these other ones here, so we're not going to do a bunch of these. Okay. If you go to the Annotate tab, you basically have the same thing here. There's your exact same creation tools, but you also have some editing tools in here. Okay, so a lot of this stuff is editing kind of concepts, where here you don't have any editing capabilities, so to speak. It's just creation. Okay, so we're going to just stay on that Home tab right now. Nathan, you good yet?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so if you open up your layer control dialog box, you should notice you don't have any other layer there other than 0. So that means this part's drawn on the 0 layer, okay? So we're going to create a new layer, make it current, and we're going to give it a color. So I'm going to go to the layer commands, create a new layer. You can call it anything you want. Make it a color that you can see. Let me know if this works good for you. I'm gonna use this magenta, and if you guys can't see that very well on the screen, I can change it to another color. But after you've generated this, go ahead and make that the current layer. So it should show you the layer that's current right now, and the color that it's using. Okay, is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
All right, so dimensioning is pretty point and shoot, and they also are linked to objects. So what that means is they're considered associative objects. So as the object that it's linked to moves, the dimension will move with it, which is really cool. So if you update your model properly, then your dimensions update with it. You don't have to go and replace them. So we're gonna start at the bottom here. I'm gonna show you 2 ways to generate a dimension. O-snaps are really helpful. In fact, with dimensions, if you're not using O-snaps, you're probably doing it wrong, because if you just pick a point, you might think you're picking it close to the object's endpoint, but you're really not. So the dimension it's giving you might look like the right value, but it's not the exact value. So what I would do is, let's go down here, open up your O-snaps. Make sure you have as a minimum your endpoint O-snap turned on for now, and then make sure it's running so that we don't have to keep selecting that every time, okay? All right, is everybody ready? So we're gonna go here. We're gonna go to a simple linear. So what I'm gonna do is pick the endpoint of that. Make sure you get that green endpoint O-snap. Once you see that, left click. Come down here and pick the other one. And notice as you drag that down, you now see wherever you want to place it, you just place the dimension. That's all there is to it. That dimension is now right in there. Okay. Everybody getting that to work? Any questions?
Nope.
Notice that it's taking on the color that you spec'd out for it. You got to be careful with dimensions. If you have that layer that has a line type on it or line weights, these objects will take on line weight and line type. So I would always make that continuous, and line weight I would make it default. I wouldn't use anything else. Okay, pretty simple, right? Not much to it. So here's another method you can use. Go ahead and click that same object linear, and notice down below it says specify first point or select objects. So if you don't want to pick points, all you got to do is hit enter, and it says, okay, select the object. So I'm just going to select this line anywhere. It found the 2 endpoints for me, and then I can come down here and just line those up with an O-snap. So instead of doing pick, 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 I can just do enter, pick, 1 pick. So I can minimize my strokes, what I'm doing, and it finds the def points for me. Also, the one you pick nearest becomes def point 1. So this would be 1, 2 in this case, the way I've done it.
How did you, sorry, can you just do the quick version of placing that again?
Okay, I'm going to delete that out. All right, you with me? Ready now?
Yep.
Okay, so you go up to this dimension, the linear dimension, and you select it. And notice it says either select a point or just select an object, right? So you're just going to hit enter to tell it you want to select an object. And then it says, okay, go ahead and select the object you want to dimension. You just select the object, and then you place it where you want your arrowhead. Does that work now?
Yes, and you just you didn't do anything to get it to line up with that one. You did.
Well, I snapped endpoint. So
okay.
It snapped endpoint to endpoint. That's because I've got that running O-snap up there. So if you don't have that, you're just eyeballing.
I do. Okay.
Okay. They might look like they're lined up sometimes, but they're not necessarily. All right. Is that working now? So let me ask you guys a question. How many objects do I have right here? 1 or 2?
2.
Yep. I've got an extension line on that side and an extension line on that side. Is that a problem?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. It's typically not a big deal anymore, because that printer, if you sent that to the printer right now, because those are right on top of each other, you're not going to see it. But back in the older days when I was using a true printer where it would pick up a pen and it would actually strike that line, it would strike that line twice. And you could definitely see it was thicker here than it was over here. So I don't worry about those being on top of objects. Now I will show you a case where this could be a problem, okay? All right, everybody got the idea on that? Pretty simple. Let's do a vertical dimension then. So we're gonna come here click this guy. I'm going to pick that point and that point, and I'm going to pull that out. All right. What do you notice about this? This one is a problem. What's going on here? What do you notice about this one that's a problem?
Is it a problem that the pink is over top, the magenta is over top the original line?
That's correct. Okay, so Nora, there's going to be a couple of ways we can get rid of that. One is to do what's called suppress this extension line. In other words, you just turn it off. The other one is to do what's called swap the draw order. I'm going to show you how to swap draw order now. So just click on your dimension, right click. Right in the middle of the shortcut, you're going to see what's called draw order, and you want to send that object to the back. And notice when you do that, it basically makes it disappear. Now it's kind of showing up there, but I don't think it'll print. So that's one way of getting rid of it. That's probably not the best way to do it, but that's one way of doing it. You guys getting that to work?
Wait, so now it's underneath there.
It is, right?
Okay.
And if you printed this, Nathan, I don't think you're going to see it. Even though you can see it, kind of, you see that there? The printer is typically not going to show that up. Because the way it does its vectors, it doesn't.
What if it was a color printer?
Well, I don't even think in a color printer it will, because technically that white line is sitting right on top of it. So unless the only thing.
What if your other color was different?
Well, even so, I don't think it would be a problem. The only thing that could be a problem with this is if you did this with a different line. Well, let me do something here real quick. I'm going to just show you something. Let me go to the printer real quick. We'll see. We'll see if I can answer your question right now. So I have a color printer. I'm not going to actually print it, but the preview is going to show me what it's going to do. So I'm going to do a display, and I'm going to have it center it. I'm going to actually do it in color. So I'm going to do none should give me color, and I'm going to preview this. Do you see it?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, so you can see it. It's actually not going to, my printer's not going to pick that up. Okay. And I would think that most printers won't either. Now, like I said, that's really not the best way to get rid of that extension line. I'm going to show you another way to do that here in a minute. Okay. All right, we're going to look at, if we go back over here, okay, so we did these two guys. We did this one. So I'm going to show you now how to do this string right here. So this is what we call a continuous string. So when you do a continue dimension, what you're going to do is you're going to start out with one dimension first, and then you're going to continue off of it. So the continue always works off of the second def point. So I have to make sure I pick this one first and that one second, and then I can continue off of it. Okay. So to do this, what we're going to do is go over to the annotate tab, because it's easier to find it here in the annotate. Okay. Everybody there? We're going to create a linear dimension first. We're going to pick that endpoint first, that endpoint second, and then just drop that guy down right there. Okay, is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
Now you notice over here, there's one that's called continue. Underneath it, there's one called baseline. So there's two options there. Make sure you're using continue, and then just pick endpoint, endpoint, and endpoint. And when you're done, you just hit enter. So notice I could do that by doing linear, 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 but that just makes it a lot simpler. So this is called a continuous string. Now these are all separate. They're not linked together, but it just lined them up really nicely. That's all. And so I have duplicate object here, duplicate objects here, duplicate objects, and of course now I have this other one here. So those are things I might have to handle. Did everybody get that one to work? That's a very common type of dimension. That's called, we call this a dimension string. In other words, a string of dimensions.
So the continuous also creates the duplicate objects.
Yes, because because that's an object and that's an object. So they're not like one object, okay? So right there, you got a duplicate. Right there, you got a duplicate. You got a duplicate there. Then you have a duplicate because it's on top of your model. Okay. Is that working?
Yes.
So keep in mind, too, again, make sure you understand, the continue works off of the second def point. So that's why I did this one first, that one second. If I did this first and that second, it would have wanted to come off of this. So this guy would have been on top of that. So got to be kind of careful with this. All right, so another type of format that you'll see with dimensions is this guy over on this side, which is referred to as a baseline dimension, where that refers to the fact that this is your baseline and everything is coming off of that. This is less commonly employed. I don't see this used as much, particularly not in my business. But I'm going to show you it's very easy to do as well. So with this one, works a little different. The baseline works off of def point 1. So we have to make sure that this is going to be def point 1 down here, and this will be def point 2. So we're going to lay down another linear dimension. Choose that point first, that point second. I'm going to pull this guy over, drop him in like that. Okay. Is that working for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. So now we're going to baseline this. So instead of continue, we're going to open this up. We're going to hit baseline. And now I can just pick an endpoint, and keep picking endpoints until I'm done. Just hit enter. And there's my baseline condition. Okay. So notice it says 5, 6, 7. Now you notice a couple of things about this. This text is too big, right? So it's kind of hitting into these. This spacing is automatically set up for you, and you can beef that spacing up. The thing that's driving that is what's called the dim style. So we could change the dim style setting to make that bigger, or we could knock the precision down on the text to make that smaller. Instead of 4 decimal places, maybe 2. So there are ways to fix this, but right now it's probably not desirable. Okay, any questions on that? How many objects down here? 1, 2, 3. And again, that's not a big issue, but if you wanted to clean it up, I would probably suppress this extension lines, that dimension lines extension, and that dimensions extension line, so I just have the 1. Unfortunately, AutoCAD's not intuitive to know that those 2 things are there, so it doesn't fix it for you. So maybe someday they'll fix that. Any questions? Okay, let's do a different type of dimension here. It's called an aligned dimension. So if I wanted to do this diagonal line, and I do it with a linear, notice when I pick the 2 endpoints, it's going to want to force it horizontal or vertical, but it won't do it along the hypotenuse, okay? Now, there is a way to force it along the hypotenuse. If I go down here to the rotated option, I can pick 2 points and show it the rotation angle, and it'll do that for me. Okay, so this is actually measuring that distance now. But that one's kind of inconvenient to use, so I'm going to show you a better one. So I'm going to delete this out. Instead of using a linear, use an aligned, which is truly just a linear, and all you got to do is just pick the 2 endpoints. It automatically does the angle measurement for you at that time. So it's just a simpler way of doing the same thing. Okay. So anytime you have a non-vertical or a non-horizontal dimension, consider using the aligned command, because that's going to be a much better one to use. And quite frankly, you could use an aligned for all of them, because it'll work as a horizontal, it'll work vertically, and it'll work diagonally as well. Okay. Any questions on that, guys? Those are the linears that we're going to take a look at.
Nope.
Good. Okay. All right. So under here now we have angular. So let's take a look at angular. So this is going to give me an expression of angle measurement in whatever unit that it's set to. So if we choose the angular option, notice it says I can select an arc, a circle, or lines to do this. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to select this line and then this line. And then you can drag it here and you get a 45 degree. If I bring it over here, I get 135. I can get 45 here or 135. Okay, so I am somewhat limited because if I place this here, there's no way for me to get it to say 150 or 315 over here. Okay, not with that option. So try that. See if you get that to work. Everybody getting that to work for them?
Yeah.
Notice this one's pretty smart because when I selected this object and I selected this object, there's no extension line over there, okay? But notice if I drag this guy over here, it'll actually put extension lines. So it knows when an object exists there and it knows when an object exists there. So this one's nice because it actually does recognize objects where this one doesn't for some reason. I'm not sure why. Okay. So I'm going to show you another option. If you want this to say the major arc here, 135, I can't use what I just did. Okay. So if we go to Angular, you notice it says select arc, circle, line, or specify vertex. So what we're going to use is what's called a vertex option. And the way you do that, instead of selecting one of these objects, you just hit enter and it'll say, okay, specify the vertex. So the vertex is this point right there. That's my vertex. And then there's this first line, there's the second line, and then notice I can drag it this way. So I can get the minor arc or I can get the major arc. And I can also line these guys up by snapping to their endpoints. So that's called the vertex option. That's the only way you can get that guy. All right, you guys getting that to work?
Yes.
Do you notice what this one did? This one put an extension line and an extension line because this one isn't based on an object, it's based on point selections. So it doesn't recognize that there's an object there. So this one would be a case where if I don't want these guys here, I may have to swap the draw order, or I might want to suppress extension line and extension line. Okay, so that's kind of the downside to that. All right, is that working okay, guys, everybody?
Hold on just one second.
Yep, sure.
Okay.
Get it?
Yep.
Okay. So, so that one's pretty easy. That one's, again, what I'd call point and shoot. So we're going to draw a couple of other objects over here. So let's go back to the Home tab real quick and open up this guy and make the 0 layer current for me, okay? And I want you to do 2 objects. I want you to do an arc. We're just going to pick 3 points and generate a pretty good size arc. And we're going to come over here and also do a circle. Don't worry about its size, okay? So go ahead and switch back to your layer that has your dimensions on it. And let's take a look at this arc. So there's 2 cool things that I could do there. I could label the arc length on that, and I could label the chord length on that. Can anybody tell me the difference between the two? What is a chord and what is an arc length? Anybody?
Was that wrong?
I didn't hear anything. Nate, were you talking?
Oh, a chord passes through an arc at 2 points.
Right. And what's the arc length then? So if I drew a line from there to there, that magenta line is the chord of that arc, right?
Right.
So this distance is always going to be less than this. Think of your arc length as the bent distance around, okay? So if you used a string and put it on that line and measured that string, that's your arc length, okay? So to get those 2 values, here's what you would do. If I want the chord, I am going to use an aligned, and I would pick in point, an in point, and there would be that's my chord length right there. I wouldn't want to use a linear because it would either give me a horizontal distance or a vertical distance, okay? All right, so that's my chord. You guys getting a chord length on yours?
Yeah.
Okay, so they have a cool tool on here for arc length. So if you go here, you'll see one that's called arc length. And notice it says select an arc, polyline, or polyline arc segment. So I can click on that guy, pull him out, and notice there's my arc length. And you will get you'll get that little symbol that tells you it's an arc length. And do definitely notice in my case, the arc length is greater, and that's true. The arc length is always greater than the chord. Okay, should always be greater. Are you guys getting that to work?
Yes.
Now, I want you to look at your extension lines. So your extension lines look like mine, or are they running straight out?
Mine look like yours.
Okay, anybody's running straight out? In other
No.
words, being in line with this? Sometimes, and I don't know why this is, but sometimes AutoCAD will do that. And that's not really the way it should be. This is the way it should look, because these guys should point in. These guys, if you intersect these two in, they should hit the center of that circle, okay, or that arc. Sometimes, and I've never figured this out, sometimes they'll come straight out, even though it's giving you the right value. So as long as you see that symbol, you usually know that you're getting the good value on that, okay? All right, let's look at the circle up here. We can do dimension, that either a diameter or radius. So if we come over here, you have both diameter and radius. If I select radius, I just pick that circle anywhere, drag it out, and notice there's my radius. And the way this always works, that line should be radial. So in other words, it should always point into the center. And notice that's true. No matter where I drag it, it's always pointing into that center point. So you really don't want to dimension it any other way. If it's not, then that means you're probably not dimensioning it properly. Also, you'll notice this little symbol is part of the dimension. So if you go in there and try to delete that symbol by doing a delete, it takes out the entire thing. Okay. There is a way to get rid of it, but erasing it is not the way to do it. Okay. Any questions anybody has? That's pretty straightforward. Let's do a diameter. Works the same way. It's just going to be double the distance. So if I do a diameter, again, pick my circle, I can drag it over here, or inside. Notice when you do this, you get these two symbols. The R is hard-coded into this text, and that diameter symbol is hard-coded into that text. So it's really hard to get rid of these things. Whereas this one down here, you can turn that little guy off, but you can't do it on these. Those are hard-coded. Okay, you guys getting that to work? Anybody? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so before I mentioned the concept that dimensions are associated with the object, okay? So what that means is if the object's size changes, the dimension will change with it. So I'd like you to click on this circle. And we're going to go into the scale command. And for the base point, select the center of the circle, okay? So I'm going to select the center of the circle as the base point. Now, you can just drag your circle either in or out. So if I drag it a little bit bigger, you should notice that what that did was actually change the size of both of these. So they reflected the fact they're tied to that circle. So as that circle changed size or shape, these guys are changing with it. Everybody get that to work? Do the same thing with your arc. You can click on your arc, take that grip and drag him out. The dimensions go with it and they update. So that's actually, again, a really cool process the way these guys work. All right. Any questions? This last assignment we're gonna do, we're gonna draw a detail, and we're gonna be doing a bit of dimensioning, but most of it's gonna be the simple linear dimensioning that we're doing. So I might have you do a couple angles and maybe a diameter or something, but most of it's gonna be this type, so pretty basic. Any questions? Works pretty well. You guys agree? Not too hard?
Yep.
Now, making it look the way you want it to was a little tough, so we're going to talk about that a little bit here. So there's editing tools that you need to be aware of with dimensions, okay? So one of them, well, one thing you can do with a dimension is some people, when they want to edit the dimension, they explode it, okay? So I'd like you to come to this dimension right here, just click on him. And you can either hit the X key or you can come up to this explode command right here. And doesn't look like that dimension changed any. But if you click on it, you'll now notice, well, that's a line, that's a line, that's a block. You've exploded this dimension. Basically, you've killed it, okay? In my opinion, exploding a dimension is the worst thing you can do because this dimension never will react as a dimension any longer, okay? So, and I taught this class one time, and we were doing a dimensioning exercise, and somebody had gone in and they've exploded every dimension in their drawing. I don't know why that thing's still highlighted. Can't get it to stop highlighting. There it is. Yeah, so you don't want to explode dimensions. I mean, that's kind of the wrong way of doing it. So there are editing tools, okay, so we're going to take a look at. All right, so I'm going to show you a bunch of different little edits here. And they break down from real simple edits to a little bit more complex edits. So I'm going to show you the first type of editing is called a grip editing, okay? So I want you to take this 10-unit dimension here, and we're going to click on him. And you notice you should be getting a grip box here, one here, one here, and one here. So these are allowing you to move your various parts of your dimension around. So if you click on the text, the way this is attached, I can drag it left, or I can drag it like right. Actually, turn off your O-snap, because that O-snap's overriding what I'm doing. So if I try to move that, notice it'll let me move my text around and my dimension line. So that's one type of edit. Here's another type of edit. If you click on this and you go to your def point, notice you can drag your def point like anywhere you want. Okay, so that was a bad edit. But I can drag my def point like over to a new location, and of course you notice that the dimension is just changing. If I want to go to the midpoint of this line, I would click on that shift, right click, go to midpoint, and select the midpoint of that. And this guy's not in its home position, so I need to move him as well. Okay, so those guys are going to be really cool tools.
That's in the stretch command?
Well, actually, it's in a mode called stretch. So when you click on this, okay, you're in what's called a grip edit, right? When I come up here and left click this, Nathan, notice it says stretch, right?
Okay.
If you hit the space bar once, it now says move. If you hit the space bar again, it says rotate. Space bar again, it's scale. So you can do multiple edits within that. But normally, if I'm just doing a move with the, I probably want to do a stretch most of the time. And that's just stretching the def point from one location to a new location. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
All right, here's a really cool one, okay? So if you click this guy and you bring your cursor, now I don't want you to click anything, but when you just bring your cursor near this grip right here, it'll suck it in like a black hole, and it's in what's called a hover state. So this is called a hover dimension or a hover grip. And notice you have a stretch option, stretch dimension group. You can do a continue off of this, or a baseline, or you can flip arrow. So if I wanted to continue, I would hit continue. Then I can come over here and I can do another endpoint like that, okay? So grips are pretty cool from that standpoint. Here's another grip that's really nice. Sometimes you want this arrow on the outside, and this is a neat way of doing it. You just hover grip it, go to the flip arrow, and notice how it flips it out like that. That's a hard thing to do if you don't know how to do that, okay? So those are called grip editing tools, and grip editing is pretty neat. But I don't use it for much more than like maybe a few placements of my def points. And my def points, I want to change that up, or maybe I want to move my text around or align my dimension lines differently. I can use that. So those are some things that you kind of have to experiment with a little bit to kind of get the knowledge of them. Is that working for everybody? So grip editing is real nice. All right, let me show you these guys. Let's come over here to this group. We notice that the precision on these is pretty intense, right? It's a lot bigger than we want. So let's say we want to bounce this down to 2 decimal places. This is a nice tool too. We can use a shortcut. So instead of using a grip, I'm just going to click on this guy. I'm not actually going to hit the grip, okay? What I'm going to do is just right click, and there's a shortcut menu that pops up, and one of those is precision. So I can set the precision to 2. Come down here, right click, precision to 2. Come down here, right click, precision to 2. So those are, that's a little bit different. That's a shortcut as opposed to a grip, okay? So there's 2 different things there. Selecting the objects and using either the grip options, or you're right clicking and going to a shortcut menu. So shortcuts will always depend on the object that you're selecting, okay, and the object type. You guys getting that to work? Any questions so far?
No.
Okay, so let's go over to the Annotate tab. The Annotate tab. So there are some nice little editing tools in here. One right here is called the Break tool. So this will break dimensions across other objects. Technically, if a dimension crosses an object or it crosses another dimension line or extension line, you should break it. So I'm violating that right there, okay? These guys should be broken on top of each other. They shouldn't be showing across each other. Does anybody have lines that are crossing like that? Tell you what, let's do this so that
Yes.
okay, we're going to do another one just so that we can see this. I'm going to place another linear here just so we can see that we got this going on. So I want you to put a linear from this endpoint to this endpoint, and I'm going to pull that out there. So here's a case where I definitely have a crossing going on, okay? So what we're going to do is tell it to break, and what's really neat is you go in here and you select the break tool. You select the dimension you want to break, and then you just hit enter. And notice it broke right there where it's crossing. Now what's really neat, when it's not crossing anything, it won't break. So if I pull that guy out here, there's nothing to cross, so it's not breaking. But here, actually, I'm not sure why it's not recognizing that, but it should be. So that's a cool break tool, and it's kind of like a toggle. You can turn it on, you can turn it off. So if I don't want that break, I can click on that, select that, and tell it I don't want it to be broken any longer. Actually, I got to go down here. Let's see, I got to tell it that I want to remove the break. So normally you add it and then you remove it. So if I add it again, select it, I could select that. I could select that. I guess I got to do it one at a time. Select that. It's not doing it for me. Okay, that one's added. I'm going to do it again. There it is. Okay, so that, again, that break tool is really nice. Really cool little tool. Everybody getting that to work okay?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at down under here, tucked in here, they have a few cool little commands. This is called the oblique command, which will allow it to kind of like it shows you on that picture. Instead of doing a kind of horizontal or vertical, you can put a slant on it, like 60 degrees or 30 degrees. Now this is not used by a lot of disciplines. Some disciplines don't use this type of obliquing kind of thing, but you can do that. Civils, architects, we use this quite often. So let's we're going to go ahead and select this obliquing tool. You select the object that you want to oblique, hit enter, give it an angle, say like 60 degrees, and notice that I probably would have wanted to oblique it the other direction, but this is that's an example of an oblique. Not going to be used. I'm not going to have you guys use that, but if you've ever seen that used, that's what that's referred to as an oblique dimension. And like I said, I know that some disciplines like mechanical engineers, they frown on that kind of stuff. So it wouldn't be used across the board, but I've seen it in my business. I've seen civil engineers use it and I've seen architects use it. So it's not an uncommon thing to see. Another couple tools that they have are things like moving your text to different locations. Let's see, what is this one? That's a text angle. So if I want to change the text angle, what I can do is come up here and I can select the dimension. And then I can tell it what angle I want that to be at, like say 30 degrees. Now the downside to what we just did is it only did it for the one dimension. So there's a neat little tool called match props. I think I showed you that before. So if I want to match this guy to these guys, I can go back to the Home tab. You can find the match props right there under the properties. You select the source, and then you just select the destination ones. So each one that you select will take on that property of whatever that dimension was. Now it'll take on other properties too, and notice when I matched the properties on this one, it lost my override. So I may have to go back and fix that. So you got to be careful if you use match props with dimensions, because you might not get all the settings you want. It may do one thing right, and then some things it may not do right. Okay, you guys seen how that works then?
Yes.
Okay, so let's take a look at one more edit, and then we're going to take a look at doing what I would call the best way of editing, which is what we call a dimension style. So one thing you can do is do a text override, essentially. But if you do that, you're going to lock the dimension up. I'm going to go ahead and delete this right here. I just want to delete that dimension, and we're going to place another one on top of it. Let's see, I'm going to do another dimension, do a nice linear. I'm going to pick from that object down to here. Okay. So I just replaced it, put a new linear in there. So you can edit text, all right, but you have to be really careful with how you edit that text. So if you go down here and double click your text, notice it brings you into the text editor because this is an in-text object. So you can do things like text overrides, you can change colors, you can change fonts, you can change all of that, but you can also change the text. So if I want that to be 10 inches and I type in 10, let's see, I'm gonna get rid of this, inches like that, and then I click that, it looks like everything's good, right? So I mean, it still says 10. All I did was change the I just changed it precision-wise, but I actually retyped it. Okay. So watch what happens when I move this, and you can try this too. If I click this guy's grip and I move him, let's say to the midpoint of that line, it should say 5 inches. Notice in my case, it doesn't say 5 inches, it says 10 inches still. Is anybody getting that to work that way?
Yeah.
All right, so what you've done is you've kind of locked your dimension up. Now it's still an associated dimension. It actually still knows that it's 5 units long, but you've overridden the text. So here's how you fix this if you ever have that issue. You would just double click on this and you're going to replace what's in there with the less than symbol and the greater than symbol. So that less than greater than means default. It means the default value. So the minute I type that in, notice it jumps back to the actual value it should be. I can close this and notice if I now grip this and move it, it's going to reflect it's actually acting right the way it should. Okay. So be careful if you're adding stuff. If you add a prefix to the text or a suffix to the text, you're okay. But if you mess with the text itself, like I think I can go in here. If I just put an inch symbol, it's kind of hard to do, but if you put an inch symbol out in the back, you're okay. But if you select the text and wipe it out, that's going to be an issue. All right. So be careful if you edit your text, but you are editing multi-line text. That's what it actually is. All right. Any questions? All right. So let's go. We're going to look at the ultimate editing tool in Dimensions, which is called the dim style. And I'm not going to get real deep with you on this, but I just want to show you some of the finer points of it. So I have out here on Blackboard for you, whoops, I have a dimension style PDF. If you open that up, you'll notice this is showing you your dim style dialog box. So it shows you that's your base dim style, and then it's broken down into tabs. So you have lines, you have what's called the symbols and arrow tab, you have fit, you have text, you have all of that. So we're going to go through these, and I'm going to show you how to edit these. There's a lot to those. We don't need to know all of them. That's the good news. But if you want to download this, this is out there for you. This is just a screen capture of all of those things. So I'm going to go here, back to this, and we're going to take a look at this. So what's driving this is what's called a dim style. And that dim style is composed of what are called system variables. They're called dim variables or dim vars. And it's kind of like the little text style that we just created, although text style didn't have that many variables. It had maybe 10 max. There's probably 50 or more variables that drive how these guys look, okay? And it also, of course, depends on what type of dimension it is. So to use these effectively, you got to do it a little bit to understand all of them. But again, we're not going to be doing that much. We're going to be doing some simple linear ones, but I'm going to show you how we can create these and how this really works well. So I'm going to go to the annotate section. Now I'm on the home tab. So I'm going to this annotate panel. I'm dropping that down, and we're going to go here. This is your dim style. And this is showing you what you have. So currently you have one dimension style in your drawing. It's called standard, and that's what's driving how all of these look. So we're going to go into the modify command, and we're going to take a look at some of the system variables that are associated with this. I'm not going to show you all of them, okay? We just don't have time, and you don't need to. You don't need them all, quite frankly, although if you start to play with these, you'll start to see how they all work. So I want you to start out with the lines tab. Okay, we're going to go over to that tab. And this is broken down. It's very nicely done. They put a lot of time into these variable boxes. When I first started using AutoCAD, they didn't have these dialog boxes. So each one of these little guys has a name associated with it, and you would have to literally go down and type its name in and set the value. And so you had to remember dim TXT and dim SE1 and dim SE2. Well, you don't have to remember any of those anymore. All of it's pretty much here, but keep in mind, every one of these has got a name associated with it. So the first thing it's talking about are dimension lines. You can change the cut. You can have a color override, a line type override, and a line weight override. If you say by block, by block, by block, what that means is it's just accepting what the layer is giving it essentially. The extend beyond ticks is showing you that if you have a what's called an architectural tick here, This guy, the dimension line will extend to beyond the extension line, but you don't have that, so notice it's grayed out. Baseline spacing, if you remember, I said our baseline was too small. That's because it's set to 0.38. We could beef that up to, like, say 0.5, so that's governing that. If you want to suppress your dimension line 1 or dimension line 2, it does it. What's really cool, this image tile will show you what's happening when you toggle on things. So if I toggle on dim line 1, notice it makes it disappear here. Dim line 2, it makes it disappear there. So that kind of cool. It doesn't show you every feature, but it shows you many of them. So this is your dimension lines. These are your extension lines, your color, line types, and line weight overrides. And then you have suppress extension line 1. So there's suppress, got rid of that one. Suppress 2, you got rid of both of them. Okay, so you can have it set up so that it does that. The extend beyond dimension line is the distance from the arrowhead to where it starts right there. The offset from the origin, this number, is the distance from the depth point to where the extension line starts. So one of the things, I don't think I mentioned this, but the extension line should never touch the object. And so there's always some little variable value in there, and that's what that is. Okay, so that's your lines. So if we go to these symbols and arrows, what we have, this is our settings for our arrowheads. And you notice you can have a first and a second. If you open up that list, you'll notice there's quite a few of them in there. What we're using right now is currently called a closed fill, but they have closed blank, closed dots, architectural ticks, you name it. There's a bunch of them. You can have none, and you can create your own. So you can have what's called a user arrow. But if I, for instance, set it to none, notice they disappear. Okay, so and they can be different too. So I can have closed filled, and I can have dot as my second one. So kind of goes like that. Most of the time, whatever you have on one side, you have on the other. That's pretty standard. So the arrow size is, again, in units of whatever you're working in. The arrow size is the distance from the tip of the arrow to its tail, basically. So that's 0.18. And one thing that's pretty true in the drafting world, whatever your arrow size is set to, your text height should also be set to the same value. So you'll notice when we get to text settings that this will be also 0.18 for the text height. This center mark, that's this guy right here, that's associated with arcs and curves. Notice it's set to mark. If I set it to none, that guy disappears. If I set it to line, I get that kind of look for it. So that's your value. And that distance is the distance from...
What did you say that was architects?
Which one?
Did you say that it's architects that use the arrows the same size as text?
No,
who does that?
It's pretty standard across the board. Everybody pretty much does that. Yeah, so it's not just architects. What I think I might have said is that architects will use this thing called an architectural tick very often. So notice that's what's called an architectural tick. But I don't use that too often. I mean, I do occasionally. I use that kind of arrow first. But what I did say is that usually the beginning and the ending are the same type, you know. And but arrow size and text height being the same. If I did say architect, I didn't mean that. But that is pretty standard, okay, across the board. Everybody kind of does it that way. Okay, is that good? Arc length symbol. That's that little symbol over here. If you don't want it, on, you can just set it to none, or you can put it above your text. So it'll play out different ways. All right, let's jump to the text box, the text tab. So here's your text. This is the style that it's currently using. So it does use a text style. And notice right now you have only one style to choose from. What's kind of cool, if you want to create a style on the fly, you can go over to that ellipsis button, that 3 button right there, and you click that, and it'll open up your text style dialog box, which allows you to go in and create a text style, and then you can utilize it. So you don't have to get out of this dialog box, create a style, and then come back into it. You can do it while you're working. Here's the thing to notice. Notice your text height. It's 0.18, and as we said, that's also 0.18. Now, if you set this to a different value, it's not going to automatically go and set that one. Okay, so you do have to set that manually. Also, and this is where you got to be really careful with dimensions. If you set this here to a value that's fixed, it'll gray this value out here. So in other words, it'll never let you use that. So it's going to override what your dimension says. And that can be a real problem. Okay. So that's another reason why when you create text styles, you always want the height to 0, because otherwise it's an issue. These are placements. Notice you have centered. That's your vertical placement. A lot of times I like to do it above. That's called an above placement. Horizontally, I usually center it. And the other things I typically do, instead of always reading horizontal, a lot of times I want it aligned with the dimension line like that. That's pretty common in my business right there. So again, this depends on how you're setting that up. All right, let's go to the next box here. Fit. This is the one. This box really requires a lot of use because when you have settings here, they all interact. Okay. What I have found just by experimentation is that usually what they have works the best. What's called this fit option either and placement on. I just leave these typically alone. But what this is saying, just to show you, this is telling you how to handle a situation where you have text and arrows inside a small area here. If you have it too small, it can't fit the text in with the arrowheads. So you have a choice whether you throw the arrows out or you throw the text out or you throw them both out. Usually your best option is what's called best fit. And what it'll do is it'll figure out when you're doing a dimension what works the best. But you can say always throw the arrows out or always throw the text out, you know, or do both. So I usually use best fit here. I usually leave that one alone. And again, you have to play with this box a little bit to understand it, because if you have that turned on and some of these other ones, they all interact. So this is the hardest box to understand, definitely. Let's go to the last one we're going to look at is what's called primary units. This one's kind of neat because this one allows you to have a unit on your dimension, which is different than your AutoCAD unit on your drawing. So for instance, right now, I believe our units on our drawing are set to decimal, but this can be dimensioning for me in architecture. So I can have it, my base drawing in one unit, my dimensions in another. And of course, whenever you have a unit format, then it'll give you a precision that you can set it to. And in this case, because it's architectural, if you're using fractions, you can stack them differently, horizontally or what they call diagonally or whatever. Now, this one actually has a unit associated with it. So notice it has an inch symbol. If you go to decimal, there is no unit. So if you want a unit, say for instance, millimeters, you would have to type in mm there. And so that it would place that. Okay. So zero suppression deals with leading and trailing zeros. So if you have a number that's like 0.002, you can suppress the leading zeros and it'll just say 0.002. Or if that number is 2.0000, you can just get rid of the trailing zeros. So you can do that with suppression. And angular dimensions, you can do the same thing on their formats. You have format settings for degrees, minutes, seconds, grades, and radians. And then you also have zero suppression. Okay. So that's your dim style, and there's quite a bit of interaction going on here. So what I'd like you to do for me is cancel out of here because you may have made some changes. I don't want you to save the changes. Okay. In fact, I'm going to suggest when you start creating dim styles that you never alter this one right here, because it's kind of like a template that you can go back to. Once you've destroyed it, you don't ever have it. So, I mean, you can pull it in from another drawing, but it's better not to mess with it. It's always better to create a secondary one before that. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to go in and we're going to create a new style. So what we're going to do is use this as our template. And we're going to come here and we're going to make new, okay? So notice it will automatically call it copy of whatever you're doing. So for instance, if you want to call it something else, I'm just going to call this gym style. This is my gym style. And you can call it whatever you want. Now, I want you to notice down here, it says use for all dimensions. And if you open this up, you have, well, you can use it for strictly linears or angulars or radius. Okay, so you have different ones here. There's a really cool process here that you can do, which is called a parent and a child relationship. So all dimensions would be your parent, and then off of that, you can have a child that'll do different things. So for instance, all dimensions might have a certain text style, but the linears might use a different one. So those are kind of like separate overrides. They're kind of neat. So we're just gonna do it for all dimensions right now, and we're gonna hit continue. And I'm gonna make a few changes. So I want you to start out, we're gonna go to lines here. Now we're just gonna do some crazy stuff just to show you that this works. But what I want you to do is come here, and we're gonna make that color red. So notice it's gonna show me that's gonna be red. I'm not gonna do any other changes here. I'm gonna go into symbols and arrows. I want you to make the first point what's called a dot. Let me see if I can find it. We want a dot, and I want the end point to be a closed field. So you can notice how it's doing that. We're going to set the arrow size down to 0.1. I find 0.18 is usually a little big. So I'm going to have the text. I want the text. We're going to create a new text style. And we're going to make it new. We'll just call it style 1. And instead of using Arial, let's use simplex. We want a simplex font, just to show you that this can really work really nicely. All right, so again, keep that at 0. If you're going to use this height, if you're going to use this text for dimensioning, you always want that 0. Make sure you apply it, close it. That text style now exists in your drawing. You can grab it, okay? And I'm going to set that to 0.1. I want this stuff centered horizontally, but I want it above vertically. And I want it horizontal. I want it aligned with my dimension line. We're going to leave fit alone. We're going to go to primary units. We're going to leave it at decimal. But we're going to change the precision. So I'm going to change the precision to 2, and I'm going to put a suffix in here of inches. Oops. All right, so hopefully you caught all that. So what I'm going to do now is okay that. Notice I now have a new style in there. There's my standard style and my gym style. I'm going to close this. The style that I just created is current. If it's not current, you can click on it and make it current. So what we're going to do is come down here now and do some dimensioning and show you how this will change. So I'm going to get rid of this dimension here. And I'm going to drop down a simple linear. And I'm going to pick the 2 endpoints, and I'm going to pick that guy right there. You can notice now this one's quite a bit different than the other ones. And so all of the style settings in here are being driven by that style. And in fact, it's pretty cool. If I click on these guys right here, let's say these guys right here, I can right click. I can go to dim style, and I can say I want to move them to the gym dim style. And I just made them that easy, that change. That right there is what I would consider your ultimate editing in dimensions, because it allows you to force standards across the board really quickly. And what's really neat about this is if you make a change in the dim style, it will automatically go up and update your dimensions. So for instance, let's do this. We're going to go back.
Where did you go after you selected them to change to your custom style?
Oh, okay. So all I did was selected them like that, Nathan, right? They're all selected, right?
Yes.
Right click, and then you notice there's a dim style right there. Did you get that to work?
Mm,
Okay, let me back out. Select your dimensions that you want to change. See, they all highlight, right?
yeah, they were highlighted.
Okay, so right click. At the very third one down, you should see it says dimension style.
It doesn't for some reason.
Go ahead, hit the escape key for me. Is nothing selected now?
Correct.
Okay, so try it again. Select those dimensions. Right click. Do you see dim style now?
Oh, without entering the selection.
Yeah.
No. Oh, wait. No, I still don't see it.
Okay. You just got to do a shortcut. So you got to select the objects, and you're not doing anything else, right? And then you're right clicking on your mouse. You should get a shortcut.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I got it now. I don't know why I did differently.
Okay, so you see dim style now?
Yep.
And then you can find the dim style you want to move it to. And then there it is. It all moved, okay? So let's make a mass change on these dimensions. So we're going to go back into the dim style that we just created. This time we're going to edit Jim, so make sure you click on that one and modify. We're going to go to modify. So what I want you to do, let's go back, we're going to make some changes again just so we can see them. I want you to go to the extension lines, and I want to change your color to a green override on that one. I mean, you wouldn't normally do this, but I just want to show you some things how this will work. So let's go to text, and we'll replace text style 1 with standard. And let's go to primary units and set that to decimal precision of 3. And then we're going to get OK and close it. And you should notice that all your dimensions that were governed by that style have now been updated to the new settings. So that's a really neat way of governing what you're getting. It's a mass update. Does it really, really effectively. Really effectively. You guys getting that to work?
Yep.
Okay, so I forgot to give you another really good tool for editing dimensions. So we need to do this before we get done here. All right, so you guys still have this vertical dimension down here that's running from the top to the bottom, right? Do you notice he has an extension line on here and he has an extension line on here? So what we can do is we can override the settings of the dim style by changing the properties. So this time what we're going to do is select this object, just that object. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to properties at the bottom. So the properties dialog box now, basically this has every variable in there that I want to change. So if you drag this slider down, you'll notice there's lines and arrows, there's text settings, there's fit, there's primary units, and those are the same things that you're seeing in the dim style. So I can override with this right here. So for instance, if I want to set arrow 1 back to an let's say a closed fill, I can just do a closed fill there. I could change, let's say, maybe I want that color not to be red on the dim style. I want it to be on the layer, so it's going to say by block. So if I go down to the extension lines, notice there's extension line 1 and extension line 2. They are both turned on currently. I can turn them off, that one off, and that one off. And when I close this box and then hit the escape key, this dimension has now been updated. Now you got to keep in mind, this dimension is still governed by that style, but what I did was overrode certain characteristics. So you don't want to do that too much, because if you're doing that too much, then you're kind of doing it the wrong way. But it's a nice way of tweaking dimensions. So that was a real easy way of getting rid of those extension lines. And then of course I could use the match props and match that to another dimension. So if I matched props of that one to this one, it picks up the same thing. But of course it lost the extension lines, which isn't a good thing for that one. So you kind of have to be careful. So the dim style is the real key characteristic. And those are going to be really, really important for you to do. And we're going to be drawing a little drawing that we're going to be doing for our last drawing, where we're going to be doing this thing. And I'm going to have you create a simple dim style, and then you're going to be doing some dimensioning. So it's actually a really cool thing to learn, and it's not hard to use, quite frankly. Once you understand it, it's not very hard. Okay, any questions? I know we've covered a lot, and I'm sure you guys will have some questions once we get into this. But is there anything I can answer right now that you can think of?
I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. Nathan, you good?
Yeah, you went a little fast there in the last section, but it's okay. I'll be fine.
Well, I can regroup on some of that if you want to see it.
I don't really have time right now.
Okay. All right. Well, you'll have the video, so I'm gonna I'll go ahead and get this formatted and posted back up there for you. And you know, we'll be able to work on this week too. So, and if you have questions, you can always shoot me an email, or we can do a secondary Zoom if you need it. Alec, how about you? Are you picking that up? Okay.
Yeah, everything's good.
Okay. The dim styles, like I said, don't get too bogged down in that. They're going to be pretty simple, because I'm going to pretty much spoon feed you what you need to set those to while you're doing it, and then you'll probably have to do a few little edits. The one thing with a dim style is usually not perfect, so it's going to get you maybe 90% of what you need, and then you may have to edit 1 or 2 or 3 dimensions. But if you're editing every dimension, you're doing it wrong. Okay, that's the whole idea. So the dim style should do most of your work for you. And again, we're not going to be doing a bunch of stuff. We're going to do a little model and some dimensioning in two different sections of it. And they're mostly, I think all I'm going to have you do is some linear dimensions. So it shouldn't be a big deal. Okay. Anything else anybody can think of? Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'll get this recording up for you. I'll get that posted. It should probably be out there within an hour. And then on Wednesday, we'll be working on our 5th assignment. If you are done with it, great. Then you can get started right away on the 6th assignment. If you're still working on it, we'll finish that off first thing, and then I'll get you started on that 6th one. And then, of course, next week we'll be doing some review, gearing up for that final test. And also make sure that you respond to Amy's email so she can try to get this book situation ironed out for you guys. I think she said she wanted it like by tomorrow at the latest or something. So just make sure that you respond to that, okay? And otherwise, I will see everybody Wednesday. And you guys have a good evening then, okay?
You too. Thank you.
All right,
Yeah,
thanks
you
a
too.
lot. We'll see you guys.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep, no problem.